What's up, everybody? My name is Jacob Hardison, and today we're going to discuss some radio stuff. So you may be sitting at home right now, scrolling through your YouTube subscriptions because you are a subscriber, right? Thinking to yourself, well, why is an RC channel posting a video about radios? And the short answer to your question is, we're not an RC channel posting about radios, we are an RC channel posting about radios, which is a very easy distinction to make because radios sounds totally different than radios. So now we've had our little bit of comedy for the morning here. In front of me is going to be my lovely Sanwa M17, which is my personal radio. And today I want to kind of go over some of the basic upfront functions that you guys are going to see straight out of the box that are going to be very important to set before you go out and hit the track. That way you don't damage anything and you have an idea of what the radio does. So pretty much every radio that is going to have multi-model memory, especially radios with these screens on them, they're pretty much going to have all of these functions, and they're going to be the most basic functions that you're going to definitely want to set, again, before you go out and hit the track. So let me go ahead, swing you guys around here, swap you views, and we'll kind of dive into things. All right, so now we've got you swapped around. We will go ahead, power up my radio, and this will just take you to the home screen of whatever radio you happen to be using. This one, of course, is the Sanwa one. So we will go ahead and we'll jump straight into things here. And we'll go into our settings and we'll start with our trim. So what trim is going to do for you is it's going to make sure that, of course, whenever you let go your steering, it is going to come back to a true center neutral point, which is important. That way, of course, if you're ever in a pickle, you can let off the steering and you know the car is going to go in a straight line. Or if you're going down the straightaway, you don't have to hold the steering one way or the other. It should, in theory, just go in a straight line. Next thing we'll go ahead and talk about here is going to be our base. So this is going to be our endpoint adjustments, EPAs, you can see for our left and our right throw. So what this is going to do for us is it is going to set, of course, how much total throw you have one way or the other. It's important to set these to the maximums that you can throw without overpowering the servo. If you were to set these too far, it can actually start to damage the servo because it's trying to overextend and over torque itself to somewhere it's not supposed to go. So it's very important to set these guys correctly. And of course, I will go over this in a later video, but today I just kind of want to go over the most important base functions. So now we are going to go up to our speed. We'll bypass a couple of those there because I want to, again, talk about specifically the important things you're going to see. And we'll go into our speed. Now for this, you're going to have a forward and a return speed. I personally never really adjust my return speed. I always want it to come back as quickly as possible, but I may mess with my forward speed. So if we tap on this, you can see we can go ahead and minus it. You can't make it any faster, but you can make it slower. This is important. So let's say you are on a high grip sealed track in a four-wheel drive buggy, or you want to run a higher BEC out of your speed control to power some fans, but you don't necessarily want your servo to go any faster. You can go into here and slow it down to whatever you are comfortable with. That way, again, you have the best overall driving experience. And the final thing we'll talk about with steering is going to be our dual rate. What this is going to do here is it's going to evenly take out endpoints on both sides without actually adjusting your endpoint. So once you set your endpoints, it's very annoying to have to go back and redo it over and over again. So what this does is, again, we can minus it, but we can't add anything. So right now we're at 100% steering, so I'm gonna have full lock both left and right. Now, if I go down to 95, in theory, I've taken 5 points of endpoint out of both my left and my right side evenly. That way, again, I don't have to go and mess with those endpoints. I can just take steering out. So this is important for, again, if you feel like you have too much steering, again, on those high bite sealed tracks, sometimes the car can get very twitchy. So it's nice to be able to just take a little bit of steering lock out of it. That way, again, makes your life a little bit easier. Now swapping into the throttle end of things, we'll go down to our trim once again. So on an electric car, you're not really gonna mess with your throttle trim a whole lot. This is my nitro model on here, so I do have my servo adjusted. That way it is all parallel and in line. But for electric, this is just gonna stay 0. So for nitro specifically, you can go ahead and change this because you want to have your servo set to that parallel mark. That way, as you're opening and closing your carburetor, everything stays nice and even, smooth, and linear. So now we'll go ahead, press our back button, go into our base. So again, for nitro, this is very specifically going to set how far your carb opens and then how much your brake linkage closes. So it's important, again, in a nitro car, you don't want to have too much throw on your brake side, because if you bottom out that linkage, you'll actually start flexing on your engine and on your carburetor, and you'll effectively make a chassis brace, and it's just not very healthy for both the servo and the carburetor. It can definitely cause damage. And then of course, you don't want your carburetor to open too far. You only want it to open to the size of the venturi. Now on the electric side of things, I will always leave this pretty much at 100%. I'll do my brake adjustments in the speed control itself. But for the throttle on electric, let's say you're on a tighter track, you just don't need as much power. Like for example, our indoor track here at Adrenaline, 9 times out of 10, I'll only run 80 or 85% power because the track simply just does not need that much. The other thing that also works out if you are on a tighter track is you can force yourself to go to a higher endpoint just a little bit, and then you can work on your trigger control. That way you can be nice and smooth on the throttle. But for the most part, you'll leave this at just whatever the max power you need for a specific track. Going back one more time here, we'll go into our speed. This again is going to be a very nitro specific tuning option in my opinion, because we are working with a servo. So for this, just like the steering, I like it to return as quickly as possible to its neutral point, but I feel like my opening is a little bit too fast. So I've got it slowed down -7. That way I've got a nice smooth pull without giving it too much throttle too fast. So that pretty much covers the majority of the base radio functions that are super important to see. Dual rate for throttle, again, I won't really mess with the high, but the brake, let's say you feel like you have too much brake in your nitro car, you can go ahead and flick this switch here, and you can see on the radio it's going to take brake out. But that is going to only take brake out. You're not really going to mess with your high point on this one at all. So with the exception of this one snippet for nitro very specifically, that is going to cover all of our base functions on our radio. And again, this is going to be on every radio that has any sort of tuning adjustments, anything that has this screen, multi-model memory, and it is going to be the very first things that you're going to want to check over before you hit the track, because you don't want to damage anything. So now we've gone over everything. I believe, like I said, I've covered all of the base functions in here. If there is anything that I have missed, oh, that's lovely. If there's anything that I've missed or anything that you want me to specifically go over, definitely leave it in the comments and I can do that. And like I said earlier, I will go back and do a video on how to do your throttle endpoints, your steering endpoints, your centering. That way you guys have a good reference there. So we will, I guess, see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching. We'll see y'all later.